Okay, so now that we went through this framework of ADICO, we looked at several examples of institutional statements from not taking photographs in the museum, what the immigrants have to do in Malaysia, what are the institutional statements for getting a fishing license in Arizona, buying alcohol in most states, for office microwave, and what happens when you're making a call and the call gets cut off, and so on and so forth. And we talked about the ADICO framework, the attribution, deontic, aim, conditions, and or else components of institutional statements, and we looked at examples of how each each component of the institutional statement fits into this ADICO framework. After having done all that, we must understand how it is actually usable in the real context of the grammar of institutions. For the Americans, this is kind of a cultural meme and icon in terms of South Park. Not everybody gets into it, but maybe the millennials or the Gen Xers get into it. Anyway, how to use the grammar of institutions. In the coming chapters, we will discuss various examples of how to use grammar of institutions to analyze concrete cases. Obviously, if they have no use, then there is no point learning about it and discussing it in such details. You, like Kyle in South Park, so here is a link that you can go and watch, may not be used to reading the terms and conditions of new purchases, but it's probably a good idea to do so when the costs of not reading them might be high. Basically, the show goes into nice examples of how many small footprints are there on everything you buy, especially the drugs that you may take, and even the commercials on TV say for 2 seconds what that particular medicine may do for you, and then there will be 40 seconds of caveats or small print that they are obliged to read off, and they read it so fast that you don't even hear it, but nonetheless legal compliance is met by reading it off. And when you buy a little tea bag or anything, there are lots of small prints on the content of that particular substance, and you cannot read it. I'm always curious to read about the amount of sugar, added sugar, that's in anything I'm buying, and most of the times, unless you go with a magnifying glass, you cannot really read it. But sometimes not reading it, you are responsible if you buy it and you didn't read it. But of course, once lawyers get involved, it can play in many ways. Okay, at a minimum, reading terms and conditions is a good exercise from the perspective of learning to use the grammar of institutions. What attributes of the consumer are specified? What are the conditions and aims? What are the consequences, if any, if conditions are not met? And so on, are serious issues, right? When you look at the concrete examples of norms and rules you experience every day, you probably will find that there are no explicit consequences. Does that mean that these statements are always norms? Of course not. Absolutely not. Many statements are embedded in regulations at higher or organizational levels. So many rules add special conditions to already existing collections of rules. So new rules are being added. Not all rules that involved in taking a course are explicitly stated in the syllabus. There are many rules at the colleges or university levels that hold for many courses and which are not explicitly stated in the syllabus, that are implied by the fact that students are taking a class. Furthermore, universities need to meet regulations imposed by the state and the federal government, so there are multi-levels of ADICO. These obligations impact the syllabus but are not stated explicitly, they have just been complied with. If all relevant rules were stated for a class, the syllabus would be 50 pages long, In fact, syllabus mainly focuses on the specific rules related to the specific course, on how the content, what the content is, how it will be covered in terms of running through the semester, what the evaluations will be, and so on and so forth, right? Thus, to be fully aware of the structure of an action situation, participants may need to be aware of several different collections of rules and how they are nested. Depending on which state you go to and whether you are in a private school or a state school, you already know what the implicit rules are. So when you take a course, you are already aware of what you are dealing with, and you only look for what the specific conditions are for the course itself in terms of the syllabus, the prerequisites, the exams, and so on, attendance requirements, so on and so forth. So you get the idea. So that's how we use the grammar of institutions in daily lives. When you're in a new situation, you may want to follow the rules, whether it's traffic rules, parking rules, property taxes, local taxes, etc., etc. But you also know many times what the implicit rules are without them being written down somewhere. So finally, critical reflections. In this chapter, you learned about a systematic way to analyze statements that can be classified as strategies, norms, and rules. Strategies do not include a specification that some behavior may, must, or must not occur. The difference between rules and norms is the explicit statement of the consequences if a rule is not met, so that a third party can enforce the rules. Okay, norm is kind of a implicit expectation in the context. Everybody in this town knows that you cannot smoke or you will not smoke inside buildings and restaurants, for example. There are rules, of course, but the norms are slightly different. Okay, make yourself think then. Look at the terms and conditions of a recent purchase. What are the rules and norms? What are the consequences if a rule is not followed? What are the rules and norms in the syllabus of the course you are following? Here I'm posting these on YouTube. I'm voluntarily doing this. I'm giving it to you for free. No conditions on who can listen to them. No deontics in terms of what happens if you don't listen. And in fact, I've gotten several messages saying many people are using these to teach their course, and I cannot do anything about it. I don't care to do anything about it. I know some person is using these to make statements to the media about what is important for India and so on. It's the person's responsibility to decide whether he or she should say they learned it from my website. But if they don't say it, I don't care, and I don't have any or else associated with it. Okay, so to the extent that this is a course and you are listening to it, in some sense you are taking it, but there are no strict rules. There are norms, because if you are a person who knows how things work, how attributions work on intellectual property, etc., you will mention that I learned this from such and such a site, and you will say it's open, you can follow it up, or you can hide it, right? Are you aware of all the rules that might apply in a given action arena you are in frequently? Under what circumstances would it be reasonable to not know the letter of the law governing the situations you may be in often? Okay, so we'll leave this here. This section of the book also concludes with this, so we'll come back and look at the next section, which we'll find out what it is. Well, let me go ahead and say what it is here. I keep forgetting, but I should not, but nonetheless. So we'll look at a systems perspective, which basically means interactions and feedbacks. We'll say briefly what a system is. You have an intuitive sense about it, and there is a formal definition of it, so I'll explain that in the next podcast. Okay.